Thank you. Item H is our presentation category with a presentation on the final supplemental environmental impact report for Berths 97 through 109 China Shipping Container Terminal Project. And here at the podium presenting is Jean Seroka. And presently, we do have one speaker card on this item after.
Jean Seroka, Executive Director. When I became Executive Director at the Port of Los Angeles, staff brought to my attention the languishing compliance with the 2008 China Shipping Environmental Impact Report and associated mitigation measures. In the spirit of transparency, I immediately brought this issue to the public, acknowledging the process to rebuild trust and the fact that it must start with full disclosure of these circumstances. With a focus on remaining solutions-oriented, I also immediately directed staff to begin a supplemental environmental impact report to bring about legal compliance and to ensure that we fulfill our obligations for the Berth 97 to 109 container terminal under the California Environmental Quality Act. In 2015, we began a dialogue with key stakeholders in this process, including the Natural Resources Defense Council and its clients, to inform them of the steps that will be taken to put us back on track. After several years of required reassessment of the feasibility and necessity for each of the measures that were not implemented, including responses to many important comments from the public, we are now ready to present a final supplemental environmental impact report to our Board of Harbor Commissioners for consideration. Certification of this final SEIR is essential for maintaining the operation that was responsible for 17% of our 9.7 million 20-foot equivalent units that were processed in fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019, and the associated jobs while implementing crucial environmental improvements. If we are unable to move forward, this facility will remain out of compliance with CEQA, with closure of the terminal a real possibility. Not only would this prolong an already lengthy process, but it could result in more than 800 jobs being displaced and delay of implementation of additional mitigation measures. Job loss and the sustained air pollution are unacceptable outcomes, especially when we have a path to usher in the cleanest conventionally operated port terminal in the San Pedro Bay. As Executive Director, I believe staff and I have demonstrated through the indoctrination of the updated Clean Air Action Plan that the entire organization represents to reassert and reaffirm our commitment to transparency, integrity, and results. I look forward to working with you in delivering the environmental and economic outcomes that we all seek here at the Port of Los Angeles, and I welcome your input and partnership. Now, with your permission, Madam President, I'll turn over the presentation time to Chris Cannon, our Director of Environmental Management.
Good morning, Commissioners. Chris Cannon, Environmental Management Division. So I have for you a short presentation to present the results for our final supplemental environmental impact report for the Berths 97 through 109 container terminal. So this is in the location. I'm sure you all are well aware of where it is. It's just north of the bridge. It's the China Shipping Terminal. Berths 97 to 109 terminal is operated by the West Basin Container Terminal, which is a joint venture between China Shipping, COSCO, Yangming, and Ports of America. The permit number 99 is with China Shipping for that portion of the operation. It runs until 2030 with 3 5-year options to extend through 2045. The 2008 China Shipping EIR certified by the board imposed 52 mitigation and 3 lease measures. 42 out of those 52 mitigation measures were actually completed or in progress. 2 of the lease measures were also completed or were in progress. 10 mitigations and 1 lease measure have not been fully completed. Of those, 6 of those mitigation measures are air quality, 4 are transportation, and 1 is a lease measure involving throughput tracking. So the supplemental EIR reevaluates the 10 mitigation measures plus the one lease measure based on feasibility, availability of alternative technologies and need. The impacts of the project were then reassessed using the revised mitigation measures, which we refer to as the revised project. We also added new measures for air quality and greenhouse gas. And I want to point out that when looking at mitigation measures, just because something can be built doesn't mean it is feasible. In the CEQA world, something is feasible when there is substantial evidence in the record that it meets, among other things, economic, technological, and operational considerations. And it has to be something that can be reasonably gotten now, not an aspirational goal. We did a notice of preparation for the public review in September of 2015. We did a scoping meeting in October of that year. Our draft supplemental EIR for public review was released in 2017, June of 2017, with a public hearing. Based on comments that we received from the public, we chose to do a recirculated document, and so we circulated that the following year in September of 2018 with a public hearing in October of 2018, and now we will plan to present the final supplemental EIR to you in October. So I'd like to just briefly go over the mitigation measures that were in the original document and then those that resulted in the revised project. We went category by category to determine what is feasible in the manner that I described. Starting out with MMAQ9, I should say that first of all, whenever you have a mitigation measure that's 100%, a requirement to do 100%, our view is that it is already asking for you to be out of compliance. No matter what happens, anytime you have a little problem, you then don't meet your 100%. So we moved that to 95% for shore power for MMAQ9, but we use all vessels, and we also allow for equivalent technologies. That's actually an increase. It goes from China shipping vessels to all vessels. For MMAQ10, it was 100% vessel speed reduction out to 40 nautical miles. I should point out that when you have the requirement out to 40 nautical miles, that includes the 20 nautical mile mark, so that is a question that some people ask. We changed that to 95% out to 40 nautical miles, again, as I described, because of the concern of having a 100% number. Scientifically, not a big difference. MMAQ15, alt-fuel yard tractors were required in the original document to meet Tier 4 final. We now, based on our feasibility assessments, determined that those yard tractors could meet the ultra-low NOx emission rate of 0.02, as well as Tier 4 final for other pollutants. MMAQ16 was collapsed into MMAQ17. In the original document, it set requirements for rail equipment. Now, actually, all the equipment operates in the rail as well as the rest of the area, so we collapsed the two. MMAQ17 had a Tier 4 requirement for yard equipment, either diesel or alt-fuel, and electric RTGs, plus a yard tractor demonstration. We went through each of the categories and figured out what they could do for each. So for the 18-ton forklifts and top picks, those are the biggest of the those types of equipment. It has to be Tier 4 final, but it would be transitioned over a 5-year period. For the smaller forklifts, they would be electric. For the sweepers, there would be alt-fuel. For shuttle buses, they would have to be zero emissions. For our rubber tire gantry cranes in the back area, which is referred to as the surcharge area, those would be electric. But in the front area, the geometry of the terminal is such that they cannot operate the electrics. So they would be hybrid RTGs, which are actually very, very clean, between 75 and 90% cleaner than a regular Tier 4 final. And then I'll describe the demonstration project that was in the original document, a single yard tractor, and it's now going to be expanded. I'll describe it when we get to that in a moment. The MMAQ20 was a 100% LNG heavy-duty drayage truck requirement, a dedicated fleet for that terminal. We recommended this for removal based on feasibility. The terminal does not have contracts with drayage operators and is not able to implement that. It's also questionable whether we can require or limit trucks that are otherwise capable of going anywhere else in the San Pedro Bay from coming into this facility. Throughput tracking is recommended for removal because it's superseded by another lease measure that I will talk about. Trans 2, Trans 3, Trans 4, and Trans 6 are traffic measures. There are various traffic control measures, modifications that were made in each of the area. The first two, Trans 2 and 3, will be completed under a revised schedule in coordination with the city's planned improvement in these areas. So we just basically try to coordinate that. Again, this is something that is done through another agency. It's not under the control of the port, but we're coordinating with them. Trans 4 and Trans 6 are recommended for removal. In the case of 4, there's no traffic impacts. In number 6, it's superseded by a separate project. The lease measures, there are new ones. This first one is the most important one that we've been doing in a lot of our environmental documents. We require that any time a terminal is going to purchase new equipment, they have to come to us and confirm that whatever they're purchasing is the cleanest available at that time. And remember that that actually applies to the mitigation measures themselves. I mentioned that a lot of the mitigation measures in the previous page would be phased in over a 5-year period. That means if at any time during that 5-year period they're going to implement something to buy new equipment, they still have to come to us and confirm that it's the cleanest available. And so if there's something that actually is even cleaner, then they'll have to buy that at that time. Their preference is for zero emissions, first preference, second preference near zero, and then if it's not, then whatever else is the cleanest available. Second, LMAQ2 priority access system will have to be implemented at the terminal for zero and near zero emission equipment. LMAQ3, that's the demonstration project I referred to before. In the previous document, there was to test 1 yard tractor. In this document, we require them to test 10. Mitigation measure greenhouse gas 1, MMGHG1, has been added. LED lighting will now be required within the interior of the buildings and all outdoor high mass terminal lighting by 2023. And LMGHG1, it's a greenhouse gas fund due to exceedances of greenhouse gas emissions over the AQMD's standard for greenhouse gas, or threshold for threshold for greenhouse gas. The tenant will have to pay $2 million through 8 payments of $250,000 into a fund that will be established in accordance with procedures that are followed by the Air Resources Board to develop greenhouse gas reducing projects here in the port. So these are briefly just the emissions, the findings for emissions. We continue to be significant and unavoidable for carbon monoxide, VOCs, and NOx. In multiple years, we exceed the thresholds for pollutant concentrations for NO2, federal 1 hour, state 1 hour, and annual NO2, and then for the 24-hour PM10 and annual PM10 as well. Health risk, we exceed the 10 in a million threshold for residential. It's 25 in a million. Note that the original document had an approved cancer risk of 11 in a million. There are reasons why it's increased, but largely it has to do with the modifications of the measures as I've described. Greenhouse gas emissions are also exceeded as I described, hence the need for the $2 million fund. So ground transportation remains significant and unavoidable, but not because of lack of mitigation measures. As I described to you, to do the ground transportation mitigation requires coordination with another agency, and since it is another agency, we're not able to say with certainty that that is completed, and therefore it's not significant. So in the CEQA world, that means we have to indicate that it is still significant and unavoidable, though we anticipate that the measures will be completed. Cumulative impacts are cumulatively considerable in all 3 resource areas: air quality, greenhouse gas, and traffic. And we also have cumulatively considerable traffic impact at John S. Gibson. It's, again, a similar situation where mitigation measures will be implemented, and we hope that that will not happen based on another agency. We received 9 comment letters on the recirculated draft EIR. Those are the ones that we received, you can see there, as well as 1 verbal comment at the public hearing. Our next steps will be that this document will be posted online today after the board meeting. It will also be mailed out to public agencies that commented, and the board will consider the final supplemental EIR on October 8th, 2019. Thank you, and that ends my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. I think we're going to take the comment cards first, and then we'll go to questions. David Pettit.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. My name is David Pettit. I'm a lawyer with NRDC in Santa Monica. I want to take a couple minutes and run through some of the history of the China shipping program and then talk briefly about what we may or may not have in store for us. I know that this matter, the now, I guess, final revised EIR will come to you for certification in early October, and we'll be submitting some written comments, and I'm sure we'll show up at that hearing as well. NRDC has been involved in the China shipping matter since roughly 2002, when we filed suit over a terminal expansion project, which we felt had been conducted without compliance with CEQA. We obtained an injunction from the Court of Appeal that stopped the expansion project in its tracks. The port then came to the table, and we worked out a deal that people call the amended stipulated judgment that cost the port in the neighborhood of $50 million to implement over the years. In 2008, as part of that agreement, there was another EIR done for China shipping. That's the EIR that had a list of conditions that Mr. Seroka and Mr. Cannon referred to, some of which it turned out have not been complied with, even as we sit here today. So in 2015, when this was about to come to light, I personally got a phone call from Mayor Garcetti, asking me, Dave, there's a problem at the port, would you work with us? And I said, yes, I would, and we've tried to. I guess we'll find out this afternoon whether that's been worth it or not when I see the now final EIR. The concerns that we've had are largely related to air quality. In my view, what's happened is that by the port's failure to comply with what it agreed to, my clients who live near the port have breathed a lot more air pollution than they should have if the port had complied with the law. There was also, in the amended stipulated judgment, which is still in force, there are a couple of provisions that will or may come into play as we move forward. One is, this is in Appendix B to the agreement, there's a provision that may require a small number of millions of dollars to be put towards community benefits, possibly through the Harbor Benefit Community Foundation, possibly in other ways. And then in, I think it's Article 11 of the agreement itself, there's a clause that requires, if there's litigation, including over the EIR, there's a clause in that agreement that requires an escrow account to be set up with $30 per TEU over a certain trigger, which I think is in the neighborhood of 350,000 TEUs. So if we're at the figure that Mr. Seroka just mentioned in terms of TEUs for the project, we are talking in the neighborhood of $30 million a year escrowed.
Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you. That can't be used by the port, but at least until the litigation or arbitration continues. And that obviously could be a hit on the port operation. So those considerations, in addition to the air quality considerations, will be formally before you in October, and I'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ray Familetti.
President Lee, Commissioners, staff of POLA. It's very concerning to the ILW workforce and many other workers that do business at the West Basin Container Terminal. This has been a long process dating back to 2008. We've heard some 2015 legal things that were outlined. When the executive director mentioned that 800 jobs could be impacted, many of those are my members. I'm already experiencing extreme impacts from other things as new technologies in the Port of Los Angeles. And this is not just alarming, but extremely frustrating that this matter hasn't been resolved. There's plenty of technologies available with cargo handling equipment that could have achieved this. I can't imagine why we haven't mitigated this issue and had things resolved. And now I understand, as mentioned today, that the final EIR will be available in October. And if things are not resolved, we're looking at a potential closure of a viable marine terminal that moves a lot of cargo, that provides a lot of good-paying ILW jobs. And when will the port disclose more details? It's very vague what's going on here. Will that be in the final EIR, or what can I look to try to understand this issue better? Mr. Cannon's report was, outlined things, but it didn't give a lot of details.
Mr. Familetti, if I may, the EIR is available today right after this meeting, not in October.
Okay.
So there's a month to go through it and analyze what's in there, and that's really what's going on right now.
Okay, so it'll be available today?
Yes, that is correct.
And then public comment will be available, or final comment?
You can send in letters up until, and then we will have the hearing on October 8th, at which time the public is invited here to comment. So we'll accept letters from today until that day, and then there's public comment at the hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Also, Jenna, just to qualify, there's already been an initial draft circulated, correct?
There's actually been 2 drafts that have been circulated, and that is all on the website as well.
Sure. So
and
when
there's
was the
been a
first-
series of comments. So as Mr. Cannon pointed out, we put out that there was a problem in 2015. There was a scoping meeting in 2015 where we took public comment. Then we did a draft, all of which was open to the public and public comment. Then based on many of those comments, there was more work done. That was also released, of which there again was public comment and letters taken, letters accepted from the public. And then here we are today, again, offering the final supplemental environmental impact report for the public to review, and then there is this proposed hearing on October 8th.
So just to be sure, because I want to make sure, 'cause what I always get concerned about is whenever someone is worried about transparency, and that was the comment I heard. So because my understanding is, and I've seen literally thousands of pages providing millions of details going back, they were all public going back, 9 months?
So, I mean, it has been public, this particular situation has been in the public domain since September of 2015, that there is this problem with China shipping, of which we're all trying to positively solve it and move forward. So since 2015, it has been in the public domain. There's been newspaper articles about it. There's been discussions here. There was a scoping meeting, which is public. So it's been going on with the public's knowledge for several years now.
Understand. I just want to, when was the first draft revisement to the EIR made available?
June of 2017.
So, thank you. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that there's been the initial draft was available in June 2017. I want to make sure that everyone's aware.
And then there was a recirculated draft of September 2018. So we've been putting out documents regularly on this topic.
So it seems like we've been extremely transparent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the reports thus far. I'm going to reserve all questions until I've had the opportunity to read the document and see what's included. But I did have 1 or 2 kind of overarching big picture things. We understand that this is a joint project of WBCT. It's a joint project over the large company that's over it all is WBCT.
If I may, this is
Yes.
actually a project of which the permit 999 is with China Shipping.
And that was my question.
It is just one permit, 999, China Shipping, the property that was outlined in the presentation. That is the property that we're talking
And
about.
that's the question. So we
Okay.
are not, even though the terminal is operated by WCBT, which is a joint venture between China Shipping and Yang Ming, this has nothing to do with Yang Ming. This is with reference to the China Shipping portion of the terminal only.
That is correct.
Got it. Second thing is the slideshow indicates that there were public comments received. Will those be included in the final report?
They
Great.
are, and all the public comments that you see there are also all on our website now. So part of the process is that we post the public comments, and then the final is responses to those comments. So all of that is available as part of this document.
Okay. And then just as a heads up, I'm assuming this is so, but I want to be sure that it's stated on the record. It appears that some of which we might be talking about is what technology was available when and what technology is available now. And I'm assuming that that will be something we will both have in the report and we'll be able to discuss at the October meeting so we know what is actually possible. And I'm very mindful of Mr. Cannon's comments that just because there is a machine out there doesn't mean it's necessarily feasible. And I'm sure there will be an explanation. So in connection with the question of transparency, everybody will be able to understand, well, why aren't we using it? And there will be an explanation.
All of that is in the document, yes.
Great, thank you. Nothing more today.
Any other questions? Commissioner Rosie?
I'm sorry, I was just going to, so first I want to thank you, Gene and the team, for bringing, I remember when this came up and how quickly you wanted to get the information out and get it worked. So appreciate that. This is very important, as we all know. I was just going to ask Chris a couple questions. So these mitigation measures, lease measures, is what we're going to see in the report, I'm assuming, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then on the 40 nautical miles, this is the vehicle slowdown reduction program, I think? The
Vessel speed reduction,
Vessel
yes.
speed reduction program. Is that the standard now is 40? That nothing's changed there other than the percentage of
That's
ships
right.
for this, right?
It's our standard program, and we just, the percentage, that's right.
Okay, and then the other thing I noticed, I guess, and it's kind of tying in with what Commissioner Middleton said, was it seems to me that the revised project column kind of indicates we know more now maybe than we did on these Tier 4 that we committed to in the past, and you put more detail in here. Is that kind of what we've learned from all this? One, we learned we didn't close on some of these mitigation measures. I think 10 was the total. And now that we're revising it, we have even more detail of what we can do and what's possible based on technology today. Does that kind of where you took this approach?
Yes. As I described, our effort was to make sure that whatever we require is feasible. A number of the things that were in the previous document, in the original document, were aspirational. There were things that it was hoped could be done. The timing, as well as the technology itself, were in many cases aspirational. We went to great pains in the revised project to make sure that whatever is there is feasible in accordance with the CEQA world, as Commissioner Middleton referred to. And so that's what you see under the revised project column.
And then just two more things. On the intersection modifications, Is this include I think we're looking at the coming into San Pedro from the Vince Thomas Bridge creating that on-ramp into China shipping by Knoll Hill. Is that part of this, or is that different? That's separate? That's separate? Okay. And then last one on the new technology. So there's a lot of items here regarding, different type of technology. Do we know the kind of training that we would need for the workforce yet on, how to maintain this type of equipment? Are we using it in certain places, or is it something we're going to evaluate as we go forward?
As new technologies, this is LMAQ1, as new technologies are developed, a lot of the decisions that have to be made are not only are they able to be implemented technologically and operationally and so forth, but that also includes the ability of our workforce to be able to maintain them and operate them as
Yeah, I
well.
was looking at AQ17. Is that the same one? You said LM.
I'm sorry. Hold on.
It's okay. It's part of the, I think,
Yes.
we're sensitive now
Yes.
to
Each
training
of
and what
those
the
are
workforce is going to
technologies.
perform. That's why I'm teeing
Yes.
it up.
The answer is yes.
Okay. All right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Moreno-Linares.
Chris, I just had two questions on LMAQ3. It says where they're going to be testing 10 units. So
Yes.
those are now available? I'm just concerned that we keep putting things in that don't exist yet, and then we get in trouble for them. So I just hope this new proposal doesn't do that it's not aspirational and up in the clouds, and because, just going over this over and over and over, where we make promises on things that don't exist, because we wish they exist. It's not gonna, I just want to make sure that, since this one is in here, that those 10, is that one of those projects that's being tested already? Or where are they going to get those 10 new trucks to work on?
The equipment is available, and they're in the process of ordering them. They're yard tractors from the BYD Corporation. They're prototypes, but they
It's
are
doable.
available for testing.
Cool. And those other ones that you said remove or not under, several of these that were agreed to before, but because they involve other city or state jurisdictions that we have no control over. So I
Well,
hope in the
those
new
were-
project, we don't have those kinds of things, right?
Do
Or if
not.
they do, they don't have these date
That's right.
limits.
And they're indicated, as I indicated, in some cases, we determined things would be significant and unavoidable because we can't promise something that is being handled by another agency, but we believe with coordination that those things will be carried out and those impacts will be reduced.
Thank you. I believe that's all the questions from the commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Cannon.